Okay, welcome everyone to this little next video on the KTT. Welcome to Velo Fan. Okay, so we're going to briefly, hopefully for your sake, briefly talk about what this bike's like to ride and stuff related to that. So how does it handle? Well, very nicely. It's obviously a glorious machine to ride. I mean, I think anyone watching a video on a KTT will probably be aware of that. But yeah, so bends, corners, it just falls into the bend. Absolutely loves it. It just rolls on in. And alright, you know, that could be potentially because of the narrow tyres, the lightweight frame, low rider position, the low centre of gravity. But I like to think it's because of the design of the frame and the fact that this is a lovely race designed machine. So yeah, so on the bends, it just falls into it. You don't have to, you know, like on a modern bike, you often feel like you need to push it into the corner, like put your weight on it a little bit and guide it in. This one doesn't. This one just literally, you could almost, I don't know, not have your hands on the handlebars and go around a bend, and you would just sort of like, yeah, like you just naturally lean your body, you know, a little bit, and the bike's going to just going to follow on round. You never get a sense of uneasy wobble or any kind of like stability issue on your bends. You just know it's gonna, yeah, it's just gonna find the right line. So that's really nice. It's got a longer, well, that's probably the wrong word. The steering geometry is a lot more raked out to my modern bikes. So my modern bikes, I'm used to it being quite a sharp angle where the front wheel is closer to you, which I think does change the characteristics of how the bike moves in the bends and stuff. I presume the more steeper angle is better and probably like, I don't know, but with the longer one, yeah, it's hard to explain, but it does make the bike feel very different. So that's really nice. Now in a minute, not quite yet, I don't think, in a minute, yeah, after this bend, we'll be going up a steep hill. Now I'm going to try and keep it in second gear for that, so that you can hopefully see how it copes with hills. But as you'll hear there, it's quite a high revving engine, so I should be able to maintain second gear. I mean, 30 mile an hour now in second is probably about right, but if I need to push it up more than that to, like, say 40, it will do it. I'm not inclined to go up this hill in third, so there is a hesitation on what I believe the bike's capabilities are, torque and power wise, but I'm hoping I won't have to go down to second, obviously, first, sorry. So yeah, so we're going to have a little bit of a hill climb here, see what we think to how it copes with hills, and I think it will be fine. I am pushing it up a little bit on the revs. Yeah, fine, I'm not doing anything with the advanced retard lever. And yeah, it's dealt with that rather nicely, hasn't it? I'm just going to change down the first here, bit of a hairpin. Right, so we were discussing the handling, which was lovely. So let's focus on the suspension then. So, as you'll be aware, hopefully, rear suspension, that comes in the way of your spine getting battered, and the sprung saddle. And there you go, there's an example of that. Whacking the crown jewels. Yeah, so rear suspension 0, but again, you know, I think that's a really positive thing. I know nowadays obviously every modern bike you ever buy is going to have a rear suspension, but rigid rear end is actually pretty cool. I think it gives you a nice, stable, consistent situation. Yeah, so front suspension, we're talking girder forks. Oh, Missed some gears going on here. Right, I think it's back in second, I think. Yeah, girder forks, so you just got a big spring there. The one difference between KTT girders and any other girder I've had on any other bike is the fact that this one has an extra support, brace, web, I don't even call it tube, but it's got an extra thing, whereas most of the others they've just got 2 each side. This has got 3 up until like a lower, where one of the sort of pins goes. So yeah, one big spring. Now you hear that? Fucking clutch slip. My fucking issue with this bike is generally clutch. Not being able to adjust it nicely to give me no slippage, and at the same time engage gears easily. So yeah, well, see, we're discussing everything to do with this bike, so that's, although it's not in line, that's one thing. Yeah, one big spring on the front, okay, for your sort of suspension, but it does have, oh fuck me, it's slipping so bad today, the clutch that is. So I'm putting it back into third because it doesn't, when it slips, it's the upper gears that it just doesn't want to pull along. It's more load on the engine, I guess. Yeah, but it does have friction dampeners on each side on these forks. Some they're only single-sided, but it's got dual friction dampeners on the girders. So it's not like a pogo stick, you know, it's not like a modern fork, but it's not like a horrendous sort of pogo stick. I'm just trying to see if I can ease this thing up a little bit to be able to get it back into fourth without it slipping, but I think that's pulling and not slipping. Right, and then you've got a steering dampener, which is pretty cool. I think the fact that you had steering dampers in like the 1920s and 30s is bloody awesome, because a lot of modern bikes, including my Yamaha MT-09, which is from 2017, does not have a steering damper as standard. I've fitted one retrospective because I just think they're so useful. So it's got that does help. You don't get much wobble on the front end from your sort of headstock bearings. Yeah, so, oh, my hands are killing me. So this indicates my ignition timing is not correct, which is going to really piss me off. This is now at least the third, maybe fourth time I've been setting my ignition timing from scratch, and I'm going to go into that as well. I think might as well talk about it now. So obviously, if you watched any of the previous videos, the ignition timing went out after my long ride to Lyme Regis. That's another video up on YouTube. Couldn't really figure it out, reset the timing multiple times, and obviously I wasn't getting it correct, because previously it would start first attempt every time, and now it's like 3 or 4 attempts. So that's really starting to piss me off, because I really love the fact that no matter what the weather was, no matter what ride I'd done, my bike would start first time and it wasn't going to be an embarrassment. Anyway, and I'm a big believer that if you set anything up correctly, no matter whether it's old or new, if you've set it up correctly and everything's within working tolerances, it's not worn out, you can achieve a good, reliable machine. But so anyway, so on the last version of my ignition timing attempt, I discovered the points gap I felt was 15 thou. I mean, with my feeler gauges, I could get a 15 in there without it seeming to move the pivot of the arm that the upper part of the points sit in. And I had checked this earlier on the other attempts at ignition timing, but I was using the little feeler gauge that comes supplied on the spanner, which I think perhaps has got a little bit of a a burr on the edge, and it just seemed to fit in there quite nicely. So I thought, oh yeah, that's set at 12 thou, and I'm doing everything correct, blah blah blah. So this time round I thought, right, let us change the gap back to 12 thou via some normal feeler gauges. This then moved my point of opening and closing of the points from the 35 that it's supposed to be degrees before to 31. So I concluded, well, that's quite a difference, and maybe that was my whole issue. I thought maybe the magneto gives the best spark when it's at 12 thou. That's what's stated for that magneto and all the rest of it. So I kind of thought, oh, maybe that's the issue. So I've now set that to 12 thou, and I've retimed it to the 35 degrees, always double checking that my top dead centre mark on the degree disc is accurate, which I always think I've checked that many times, and I'm happy with that. So yeah, so this time round, starting it today, should have been a first bump, first start. Should have been, and I shouldn't have the amount of vibration that I think I'm feeling in the bars. But there you go. It took me 3 attempts to start it. In the end, I gave it a lot less choke. I think I gave it 0 choke because we are in hot weather. That made it fire once on the second attempt, and but did not run. And then on the final third attempt, I gave the advanced and retarded with less retardation, so a little bit less open, and I went back to giving it quite a lot of choke, and it ran. But I did have to, again, this is sort of this new thing I'm having to do, is sort of slightly paddle the bike along, which I hate. I think it looks so unprofessional, is going to be what I'm going to say, but I mean, I know, you know, but anyway, so yeah, so and anyway, but when I first rode it, when I first got on it after having done that, I thought it was, you know, sounding rather nice, and I thought, yeah, I'm really happy with that. Although it took 3 attempts to get it to start, the sort of sound of the bike was good. However, like I say, I'm now suspecting that I've got a little bit too much vibration in the bars, which indicates timing. So we will see. We'll see when I come to leave my destination. So yeah, so obviously if I was to continue my story on, which I like to do in these videos, ignition timing is still an issue for me. But like I say, I've done everything I can now. I've set the degree wheel, you know, I've done it all. But whoever, well, I know who it was, but you know, the chap that built this bike before I got it, he had it spot on. Like I say, he just started every time, and it was just lovely, and there was no real vibration in the bars from the engine, so it was all good. And now it is not so good. Frustrating. But anyway, but what was the other thing I was going to say on that topic too, of the ignition timing? Can't remember now. Oh, fuck it. Yeah, I don't know, so let's move on. Right, so back to the bike and how it is to ride and all that. So let's move on to the brakes. I personally think the brakes front and rear are really, really good. I know obviously I'm talking about a bike that's really old, so I can't put it in the category of modern disc brakes. And when I say modern, I mean really modern. Older disc brakes can be pretty shit, to be honest. But yeah, this one, the front brake's really good, and the back brake's good. And I think most velos I've had, the back brake's been good anyway, but the front brake has sometimes been really poor. Whether that was just glazing of the disc, glazing of the shoes or something, more than likely, or maybe the cable, you know, I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, so anyway, so yeah, brakes good, front and rear, and so much so that I'm reluctant to use them to their ability. I'm always quite soft on the brakes because I don't have a rear light. I have no lights on this bike, but I don't have a brake light, and that always scares me, that a car driver not understanding the vintage nature of this bike is going to be like only braking when they see a brake light. I don't really slam the brakes on, but they are good. They're better than I think quite a lot of other 1930s bikes, in my opinion. And the front one, you can see that actually the hub, the width of the hub, that would give, I guess, the braking area, although that might not be the case, because the shoe width is probably the same on all velos of this era. But anyway, I've not really been in there that much, but yeah, it's good. So brakes are good. Acceleration, so power, torque. Now I feel this bike performs well. It is a 350, so if I'm up against the vintage 500, I don't really seem to be able to compete really, although some of the 500s aren't quite as good because they're like a long stroke engine or whatever, and they rev out quite low, whereas this one, because it's quite a high revving engine, it does do alright. So I tend to think it's quite punchy from a torque point of view, as opposed to a top end revvy power point of view. When I'm in first and square, first is quite a short gear on this bike. The traditional TT ratios is a really long tool gear, but I think someone's changed them out, because like I say, at home I've got the TT ratio cogs sitting around in a box that came with the bike. So it's not a long first, but second, you just rip her open from like low revs and it goes, and it really pulls. So yeah, I think it's got a lot of grunt personally. Top end power, like I don't feel a power band. I don't feel it like light up at a certain revs really, which I've felt on other bikes. I have managed to rev it out in second, probably in third, not in fourth yet. And that's interesting to feel that and go, okay, yeah, I must have reached the limit, whether that's carburation or revs, I don't know. So yeah, torque is good, I believe, for a 350, and power is good. And the ratio on the chain and sprocket and gears, I think, although like I say, I think my first gear may have been changed, the rest of the gearbox I believe was the same anyway, even if it was TT ratios. So the ratios and chain and sprocket thing are pretty good for this bike. I've set it up at 75 miles an hour and I'm quite happy with that. That's on the speedo 75, so it's probably more like 70, but yeah. And I believe it's meant to do 85, and I'm always too scared to take it to that, because I don't know, I suppose I can't brake as good as modern vehicles at that speed, and it might just want to blow up on me. But there's a chap who's got a really cool website actually, and I've just created an Instagram account, so if you want to follow me on that, it's KTT _ whatever it's called, the lower straight line velo fan to match this channel obviously. Yeah, he was telling me his bike, which is the same bike as mine, is at quite a state of tune, like he's changed the piston and probably the cams. He has been clocked at over 100 miles an hour on his. I think it was 103 or 104. Either way, to be over 100 miles an hour on a 350 from this era, I think is very, very good. And I'm not looking to emulate that. I'm quite happy that mine's standard bike, standard piston, standard carb, standard jets, leave it standard. I don't want it to bloody blow up. I can't afford to repair this thing should it be knackered. So yeah, so I think speed top end wise, you're probably going to look at the 85, as I believe is suggested it's capable of. But you know, you never know, it might do a bit more than that. Right, and then on to what can we go with next? Right, tyre pressure. Okay, so recommendation on that, it's like horrendously low. You're talking, I believe, maybe 16 or 18 on the front and 18 on the rear, so I think it was probably 16 on the front. Remember that they weren't exactly the same. So I don't run it at that. I probably pump it up to 20 front and rear, and then obviously where it's not a regularly used bike, it probably has dropped down quite a bit. But I was really surprised by that low PSI for the tyres. Now I know I've got no rear suspension, so I'm grateful for it when it comes to that. But yeah, I just expected to be up there in the 30s, like low 30s, but there you go. So, oh hello, you're going to have a bit of a fucking issue here, aren't we? Don't you pull out your cunt, okay, good man? Thanking you kindly. Yeah, so tyre pressure is lower than I would personally expect on a modern bike, but that helps out have it, your son. Yeah, that helps out with your back and your bum, because this saddle, that's another thing I want to mention actually. This saddle is a as correct Dunlop elastic bad boy. Now I didn't get it with the bike had lost its original saddle, which was a real shame. But I managed to source this one, which was a good 2 or 3 years of sourcing, and a very good friend. No, that's a little bit, not a very good friend, but someone who was very kind to me, sourced one and let me have it at what I would say is a reasonable price. And yeah, and so anyway, the saddle is bloody uncomfortable. And I think that's because it's changed shape. It's no longer like flat looking with that ability to give you a bit of rubbery comfort. It's sort of shaped now like spoon shaped, so your balls end up getting crushed. So not overly comfortable. So I think the slack, low pressure tyres helps on that side of things. Yeah. So that's tyre pressure, right? Now then, oil. So oil is going to be always a topic of debate, but I'm on castor oil, whichever brand I can afford at the time. I mean, I try and use I think it's Morris, is it? Morris? Can't remember which one it is. It's either Morris or Miller, and I'm now on the cheaper one. I think it's Miller's, but the cheaper ones I can't really afford the other. So yeah, so I'm on castor based oil. Gives it a nice castor oil smell, and everyone always says that to me whenever I pull up somewhere. Supposed to give the best protection for my parts in my engine, so I'm a big fan of keeping it standard on that subject. However, as it was a race bike, they did not bother fitting a tap to stop oil supply, and although there will be an internal version of a non-return valve, it's not going to really stand up to much. So I drain the oil after every single ride, and that's okay, because it means I put it through a fine mesh gauze type thing, filter as such, so I kind of sift out some of the shit each ride. Yeah, so I have to drain the oil after every ride. I'm supposed to circulate the engine oil before I try and start the bike, which involves pushing the bike around with it in gear and it pumping the pump to get some oil up to the top. However, I don't push it around as much as I used to. I used to walk it around a lot before my first attempt to start, and that's another subject on the sort of deal of handling this bike. So although it handles lovely when you're riding it, I find, because I'm nearly 6 foot tall, and the handlebars on this bike are really low, and the bike's just generally really low profile, seat handlebars, whatever, and so yeah, so I struggle to push it around because I just find it's awkward for me, kind of bending over and trying to push something along. So and I actually dropped the bike once. I'm just pushing it along, and for whatever reason I was caught off guard, off balance, whatever, and yeah, so it fell the other way to me, obviously, rather than into me. I would have been able to hold it up. It's not a heavy bike. So yeah, so manoeuvring the bike, although older folk tend to want a lightweight bike to manoeuvre around the garage, driveway, whatever, I personally find it troublesome to manoeuvre compared to a modern bike with higher handlebars and higher tank. I always put the fuel tank against my side of my body, and it really is a support, and then you're just sort of guiding it along with your hands, whereas with this one you're obviously not really able to do that. Right, massive great big knee grips on the tank, right, these bad boys right here. I'm just going to clamp my legs on them in case you see that in the video. So they're obviously designed, and they are scalloped to the sort of shape of your leg, so that your legs can grip it like I'm currently doing now. But I have to put my feet on tiptoes to do that. Previous owner had drilled new holes and rotated the position of his knee grips in an attempt to get a really nice position for him, I guess, but it does not look right. I wanted to put it back to standard, so I have done. I personally don't grip the tank with my legs on any of my bikes, modern or old. I know you're supposed to, but I just don't really do it. So I keep my legs, generally keep them wide of those massive tank knee grippers. So that's me on that one. But you might find them a real nice aid to grip the tank nicely. The tank's big on this bike, big capacity for fuel, I believe, compared to some of the other older velos. Like my restoration bike's got a smaller tank, I would suggest. I've not checked the capacity. Right, what else can I say? So I get nervous before I ride this bike every single time, and it's to do with being on modern roads and traffic when you have no lights and I don't have any indicators, and I just don't really bother with my arms. I mean, I know I should do, but because the carb does not idle, I don't tend to signal for turning right, because it's just like, well, the engine's going to want to die. So no indicators is a bit of an issue. You just feel really vulnerable on it, I would suggest. But on the flip side of that, I always feel immensely proud to be riding this bike. I never ever, you know, get on this bike feeling like, oh, you know, I'm just going out for a regular ride. This is always a big deal to ride this bike. But on top of that, slightly on the flip to the negative again, there's so much effort. I always feel a bit like, can I really be bothered to ride this thing? It's going to be a fuckload of effort to take it out for a ride. You know, it's not like a modern bike, you just get on it and turn the key and, you know, you just don't fucking pull out. So because of all the prep, like as in I always put fuel in the tank rather than going to a fuel station. But listen to her go. Fuck me. She just wants to go, and it's nice and warmed up now after this ride. And the clutch isn't slipping, so that's a beauty. I think it maybe, I don't know, but yeah, that's seeming to not slip at the minute. Yeah, so I always think it's a lot of effort for me to get on this bike. Yeah, I don't know, maybe because of all the bump starting and the prep regarding to the oil, and then when you get home you also have to drain the oil and whatever. So I guess it's perhaps, yeah, feels like a lot of effort to ride this bike, but the reward is definitely worth the effort. Yeah, what else can I say about it? Because I think people are keen to know a little bit about what's it like to have a bike like this and be able to use it. Well, I think one of the key things as well is to mention the fact that I use it on the road, and I think that's a big point to make. Most people with a KTT or any British race bike will have it for track days, parade, whatever. They don't really use it on the road like I am, and so they don't have to deal with shit like this. I don't like doing this. I've got the clutch lever in because I always find that going into first is a bit tricky, and from the point of view of grinding gears when I don't, you know. Anyway, so yeah, so it is a road going race bike, and I think that's something that's always got to be considered. But like I say, what most people assume is that it's going to be really hard to ride on the road. Everyone pretty much says to me, oh bloody hell, you know, that's going to be a nightmare to ride on the road. You know, it's going to be all or nothing, let's just say, regarding riding. But it's not. Like I say, I genuinely think this is really, it's not, you know, the issues that I have around riding on the road are more simply like having to bump start it, non-idle, no indicators, shit like that. But that would be on any vintage bike that I'm, you know, okay, you would have a kickstart, but you know, for the actual riding of it, the rideability, the sort of, you know, whatever, is quite alright. It's actually quite nice. Now, I suppose another thing to mention that I think is worth mentioning is the bloody exhaust. So she's a nice straight through. She's not a megaphone, but she is straight through. And I remember one chap leaving a comment on my video, one of the ones at Muddyford Quay, which is where I'm now about to enter in a minute after we get past this cyclist. Yeah, so one of my videos down here, like I say, at Muddyford Quay, and he left a comment saying, oh, if I heard that bike turn up round me, I'd give him a piece of my mind. And I always thought, you know, you want to get fucked, mate, because at the end of the day, this is exactly how the bike was made and sold, and it's completely original. Like, I know that the exhaust on this bike is not even a modern reproduction copy. I just know that because I've looked at it and I can tell. I know it's got the right bend, the right shape, the right thickness of metal, the condition of the chrome and all that stuff. So yeah, so like I say, that mate, you can do one, because I think it's fucking glorious sound. you know, it is loud, and it is, I think, the loudest bike I've ever owned. However, it's correct for the bike. I think if you silence this bike down to make it more pleasing to the modern day motorists and pedestrians, whatever, I think you're doing the bike a massive injustice. I believe this bike needs to sing its song fucking loud. So yeah, so straight through pipe, let's have it. Actually, I'm going to leave it in first down through it, I think. So that's another factor. Yeah, I don't know really, like I say, what the hell I can really go into. I'd love to give more detailed knowledge of, let's say, the cams that I'm running, to say, oh yeah, well, it's, you know, like people go on about, oh, I've got a high lift cam and this and that and stuff like that. So but obviously I don't really necessarily have that level of knowledge, shall we say. But yeah, you know, like I say, I've given probably a reasonable roundup, probably spent too much time talking to you about it. I think people prefer my videos to be shorter, and not only shorter, but where I cut sections out. And on this ride, I think I've only actually stopped talking for a second. Now this car in front's doing me head in, so whichever lane he takes, I'm taking the opposite lane. Right, which one are you going down, mate? That one. Right, okay, that's fine. Just get out of my way. That's good, leave it in first, don't need to go too mad down here. I'm hoping my mate's down here. I spoke to him earlier and he said he was, but that was a long time ago, and I wanted to go through the forest before I got here. If he is, I'm hoping he's on his Triton. He's got a lovely Triton. So yeah. Alright, thanks for watching, guys, as ever. And yeah, hopefully I'll get my mission timing sorted out, for next time.